All right, Jose. So we are picking up Emirz Hashem on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, 33a, and we are picking up. First wide line. Maskifla Rav Acha Karchino Elamiata Gidola Nakama She Nitna Bein Shtei Osios. So remember again, yesterday we were talking about the idea that Das is great, right, or the Beis Hamikdash is great because it's mentioned in between two names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But according to this logic, right, Nekama, revenge should also be great because Nekama is also mentioned between two names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shneimar, Kel Nekamos Hashem. That ultimately you have Kel, which is the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nekama, revenge, and Hashem. So maybe revenge is also something great. Amrale in B'milsa Miha Gidolahi. The Gemara says, you're right. The truth is, revenge when it is necessary and revenge when it is dealt with by HaKadosh Baruch Hu is actually something incredibly important. Ultimately, again, why are there two types of nekamas? So the Gemara says, because remember, nekamas is plural. So what does it mean? Revenge is plural. So the Gemara says, achas latova v'achas l'ra'ah. There's one revenge. That's revenge for the Gemara. And remember, because the way the Gemara is looking at revenge is that nekam is like a payback. So there could be a payback that is like a good payback, and a payback that's a negative payback. So the Gemara says over here that again, there's two paybacks. One l'tova, one for good, and one not for good. The Gemara says l'tova dichsiv hofa mehar paran. So ultimately, again, revenge for good because this is hofa mehar paran. L'ra dichsiv kel nekamos Hashem kel nekamos Sophia. So we'll say really like a really incredible idea, and I think like a very timely Gemara as well. And I will say, I think for many of us, just like when you contemplate it, the notion of revenge has generally been something that is like alien to us. It's alien to us, right? That again, revenge. Not only that, generally revenge, when you think about it, it's something that's prohibited, right? You're not allowed to take revenge against someone. But yet it's interesting, the Gemara is pointing out that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is known as a Kel Nekamos, a God who takes revenge. I'm sorry? Well, he avenges, but the word in the kama means revenge. So right, he takes revenge. I'll say, but I'll point out, because what do you see from here? You see that there is a place for revenge. Now, the way we normally deal with it is we leave revenge to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? We don't dabble in that, because when man dabbles in that becomes much more complicated. But ultimately, again, we see this concept of saying HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there have been those who have oppressed us. There have been those who have afflicted us. There have been those who mistreat us. Baruch Hu, revenge, right? Take care of us. Set the world straight. Set society straight. Why should it be that those who perpetrate wrongs should just be able to do so without any kind of recourse or any kind of repercussion? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the world should run on justice. Tzedek and mishpat. Kel nekamos Hashem. Overwhelming. I will say, the beauty of Torah, Bella just and John, the beauty of Torah is you can learn the same pasuk, the same Gemara in different times, and depending on where you're holding in life, it takes on a different meaning. How many times have I seen this Gemara Kel Nekamas and just like blown through it, right? And yet, again, in a time in which we're living, suddenly, like, no, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want you to do that. I want that. I want the equilibrium to be reestablished. I want there to be a wave of justice in this world. Why is it that we always have to suffer the injustices of others? Why is it that we always have to be on the short end of the stick? Amazing. Let's go back there. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Akiva Omer bracha revius b'fnei. Remember again, we'll say back to the Mishnah. So this we're speaking about the bracha of Havdalah. And when it came to Havdalah, Rabbi Akiva said that Havdalah is its own bracha. It's the fourth bracha in Shmona Esrei. Amar li Rav Shman bar Abel Rabbi Yochanan. Michti, Anshe Knesses Hagadolah tiknu lahem li Yisrael brachos utfilos kiddushos v'Havdalos nichsi heichi takin. So listen to this incredible Gemara. The Gemara says, I don't understand. How is there a machlokes about where Atachan Antanu is? That doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't it make sense? We'll say, remember again, Atachan Antanu is part of Shmona Esrei. Shmona Esrei was created and instituted by the men of the Great Assembly. Anshe Knesset Hagadolah. Remember again, we'll say just historically, Shmona Esrei was created after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Tefillah that after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, so we were exiled and we were in Bavel. What happened in Bavel? The generation that was born in Babel was not proficient in any one language. So they knew Aramaic, they knew Hebrew, but they weren't really they didn't have a mastery of any one particular language. So both say, so remember again, before prayer was codified, how would you daven? You spoke to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But speaking to God, by definition, requires what? Mastery of language, at least on some basic level. The Rambam writes that after Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, there was a lot of we'll call it lack of linguistic confusion. So the rabbis saw this, and what did they do? They codified Shemona Esrei. That was the men of the Great Assembly, Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. So the Gemara asks a very simple question. The men of the Great Assembly made Shemona Esrei, and they also made all of the insertions. So Ya'aleh V'yavo, Mashiv Rachman Hashem, Saint Talmud Livracha, and Havdalah. So where do they put it? In other words, why is there a machlokus about where it goes? This was a rabbinic enactment. So how did the rabbis legislate it? So both say this is incredible. Amarle, betchila kavua betfila. Listen to this. In the beginning, Havdalah was part of davening, right? It was part of Shemona Esrei. In other words, it's right part of Shemona Esrei. Shiru. Then both say now. Originally, that was done. Why? Why was that done? Why was Havdalah added as part of Shemona Esrei? I will say out of a concern, out of a, we'll call it a fiscal concern. Because people didn't necessarily have the money to have an additional cup of wine. Right? You already had wine for Kiddush on Friday night. You already had wine for Kiddush during the day. Right? That's the first time during the Haftorah. And then again, you have to make Kiddush. It's a joke. Right? Okay, right? Then you have the second Kiddush, ultimately again, right? Kiddush during the day. So now, to make people have a third cup would have been potentially like a financially onerous. So Chazal said, you know what? We'll just put Havdalah in Shemona Esrei. Put in Shemona Esrei. So the Gemara says, Heshiru kavu alakos. Then when Klal Yisrael became a little bit more wealthy, so they went back and they put it back on the cup. So the Gemara says, Ha'anu. And then ultimately again, then Klal Yisrael became poor again. That's right. This is the cyclical nature of wealth, right? So again, it's interesting to point out. So the original enactment of Havdalah ultimately again was in Shemona Esrei. Then we had money. They put. It sounds like what they did is they removed it from Shemona Esrei, put it on a cup of wine. Became poor again. Removed it from the cup of wine, put it back in Shemona Esrei. Vehem Amru, and then they said Hamavdil b'tfila tzarich sheyavdil alakos. At that point, there was with all the back and forth. What Chazal essentially said was just what? You know what? Do them both. Just do them both. Right? So make Havdalah in Shemona Esrei and Havdalah ala kos. Now again, that presupposes that you have a kos. If you have a kos, make Havdalah. If you don't have a kos, okay, then you're Yotzei with Havdalah and Shemona Esrei. So the Gemara says, Itmar Nami. We have a brayso that supports this. Amr Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, Amr Rabbi Yochanan. Anshe Knesset Hagdolah tiknu lem Yisrael brachos utfilos kiddushos v'havdalos. So Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, the men of the Great Assembly, established Shemona Esrei and all of its add-ons. So betchila kavua betfila. So in the beginning, Havdalah was part of Shemona Esrei. Shiru, when we ran into a little bit more money, kavu alakos, they put it on a cup of wine. Chazru behano, then we became poor again. Kavu betfila, they put it back in prayer. Vehem amru, hamavdo betfila, tzarich sheyavdil alakos. Well, this is just interesting to see. Historically, there was this period of time, I don't know how long it spent for, but this period of time where it wavered. It went from davening to the coast to davening, and then at a certain point, Chazal all right, enough. It's just, we're going to do both, and if you could swing the coast, then swing the coast. But if not, at least you know that it's covered by Shemona Esrei. Yes?
It's the point that when it went back to coast, they forgot where it was supposed to go back in when they started feeling.
Correct. So we're going to get there in just a second. But that's essentially what's happening over here is, given the fact that there was so much movement in Shemona Esrei, out of Shemona Esrei, at some point in time when they took it out of Shemona Esrei and they put it back, there was confusion. Where do we put it back? That's exactly it. So the Gemara says as follows. Good. Hamavdil betfila tzarich sheyavdil alakos. Okay, Itmar Nami, Rabba Rav Yosef, Amri Tarvayu, Hamavdil betfila tzarich sheyavdil alakos. When you make Havdalah in Shemona Esrei, you still have to make Havdalah on a cup of wine. Amar Rabba says umosvina neshmaita. But we can ask a question from another ruling. What's the other ruling? Ta'a v'lo hiskir gvuras kisham b'tchias hamesim. If a person forgot to say Mashivaruach Umori Dagashem in Tchias Hamesim, Usheilu Berachos Hashem, or B'Sein Talamot Livracha in Barich Aleinu, Machzirin also, you have to go back. Right? If you forget Mashivaruach Umori Dagashem, or you forget B'Sein Talamot Livracha, you have to go back and repeat Shemona Esrei. Yet, V'Havdalah B'Chonin Adas, Ein Machzirin also. Yet the halacha is, by Havdalah and Chonin Adas, you don't have to go back and repeat it. So you forget Havdalah, you don't have to go back and repeat Shemona Esrei. So Gemara says, why? Mipnei sheyachol la'omra ala kos. Because you could always go ahead and still say it on a cup of wine. The Gemara says, lo tema mipnei sheyachol la'omra ela ema mipnei she'omra ala kos. Don't read it as because you can say it on a cup of wine. That makes it sound like saying on a cup of wine is optional, If you want to, you can. If you don't, rather no. It means if you forgot Atachon and Tana Shemona Esrei, you don't have to go back. Why? Because we are making Havdalah ala kos. So essentially, what the evolution of halacha became is from going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. We just said, do them both. Do them both. Havdalah in Shemona Esrei and Havdalah ala kos. Incredible. Itmar nami. Amr Rabbi Yomin bar Yafes, Shal Rabbi Yosis Rabbi Yochanan, B'tzidan, Va'amr Rabbi Shimon ben Yaakov Dimintzur es Rabbi Yochanan, Va'ana Shamis, Hamavdul B'tfila, Tzarek Sheyavdul ala kos olo. So here's the shaila. If I say Atachon Tanu and Shemona Esrei, do I still have to say Havdalah on a cup of wine or not? Va'amr lei, Tzarek Sheyavdul ala kos. And he said, yes, you still have to make Havdalah on a cup of wine. Sibailu, the Gemara the kasha. Hamavda ala kos mashi yavda b'tfila. So I'll say, so what about the reverse? What about the reverse? So I'll say, what about if you made Havdalah on a cup of wine? Do you still have to say Atachan and Tano and Shemona Esrei? Now, you think to yourself, how does this come up? It come up very simply. You made Havdalah before you daven Ma'ariv. It could happen, right? But in other words, as much as we're used to davening Ma'ariv, right at the end of Shabbos before I make Havdalah, but technically speaking, I don't know. I'll tell you where this could come up. Person lives far away from shul. Right, so what I really want to do is I don't want to have to drive back. I don't have to walk back from Ma'ariv. So instead, I'll make Havdalah at home, and then I'll go back and daven Ma'ariv at shul. So now I've already made Havdalah ala kos. Do I still have to say Atachan and Tanu and Shemona Esrei?
The same Baruch Hamadu qualify as a type of Havdalah that would change what the halacha is if you didn't say the Shemona Esrei or.
No, so essentially, Baruch Hamadu ben Kol V'Shachol essentially is like Atachan and Tanu. That's bottom line halacha. That's pretty much what it is. Pretty much what it is. It allows you to do malacha. Again, I'm skipping till the end halacha l'maisa. It allows you to do malacha. Doesn't allow you to eat. Havdalah ala kos is ultimately what allows you to eat. But again, we're going to see. Let's continue a little bit. So that's the Shabbos. It's an interesting shayla. I made Havdalah ala kos. Do I have to still say Atachon and Tanu or not? Amr Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Kal v'chomer mitfila. Yes, it's Kal v'chomer. What's the Kal v'chomer? Umat tfila de'ikar takan tehi. So remember, I will say, so Havdalah, as it began in Shemona Esrei. That's the Ikar Takanta. So reciting Atachon and Tanu, reciting Havdalah and Shemona Esrei is the Ikar Takana. So Amri Amavdu b'Tzilat Tzarech Havdalah Kos. So I will say, the halacha is that even though the Ikar Havdalah, at least initially, was Atachon and Tanu, even if you said it, you still have to go back and say Havdalah on a cup of wine. Hamavdu ala kos, the love Ikar Takantehi, lo kol shekain. At the end of the day, again, if you say Havdalah ala kos, which was not the Ikar institution of Havdalah, then of course you still have to go back and say Atachon and Tanu. So what the Gemara seems to be saying over here, not seems, Gemara is saying over here, is that even if you recited Havdalah on a cup of wine first, you still have to include Atachon and Tanu in Shemona Esrei. Pretty incredible. So the Gemara says, Tani Rabbi Acha Aricha Kamei Drav Chinina Hamavdu b'Tfila Meshubach Yosem Mishiyavda ala kos. Listen to this. He says somebody who makes Havdalah in Shemona Esrei is more Meshubach, is more praiseworthy than someone who makes Havdalah on a cup of wine. V'im hivdil bazu yanuchu lo brachos al rosho. And if you make Havdalah in Shemona Esrei and on a kos, mamish brachos on your head. Brachos on your head. He'll say, I just want to point out, Yiddishkeit is not complicated. All that Kadosh Baruch Hu will say, what does this mean? It's such a strange thing, right? If I make Havdalah on Shemona Esrei and on a cup of wine, Yanuchu lo brachos al rosho. Brachos will be showered upon him. We'll say, what does that mean? What does that mean? So I think what the Gemara is saying is like this. We'll say, do you know where real bracha comes from in life? Real bracha comes from when you push yourself beyond expectations. Living up to expectations, that is expected. That's why they're called expectations. Right? That's expected. Transcending expectations, that's where greatness is. And that's where bracha is. And I will say, by the way, it's true everywhere. It's true everywhere in life. This has been lost in greater society a little bit, but today, I mentioned this in Daf Yomi this morning, how you see that now there are certain organizations that are distancing themselves from DEI. Right? They're distancing. Why? It's not shocking, because the whole thing is foolishness. The idea is if you're running a business, you're running an organization, you want to be successful. So therefore, who do you put into positions? The people who could make you successful. It doesn't matter what their gender is, what their race is, what their religion is, what their identity is, what their pronouns are. Who cares? Who cares? Success comes from whoever is willing to work the hardest. In fact, I always feel like, one of the things that I appreciate most about America, I'm a first-generation American, one of the things that I appreciate most about this country, with all of its craziness, is that what you could do in America is if you are willing to work harder than the guy next to you, then you can find success. But you have to be willing to get up earlier, stay up later, and work just a little bit harder than everyone else, and you could find success. That's not true everywhere. That is not true everywhere. That is the great American dream. You can make that happy here. I think before it was the American dream, it was Chazal's dream, right? So Chazal is saying, if you make Havdalah ala kos, right, in Shemona Esrei, and ala kos, then guess what? Yanuchu brachos arosha. That means you're a person who exceeds expectations. You could do either one of those and you're covered. You're doing both. You're exceeding expectations. That's a bracha-filled life. That's a life of success. Incredible. All right. I was going to have to stop over here. Wow, we're really covering very little ground. But all right, Baruch Hashem. Okay, good. You know what? But we're soaking it in. We're taking it in. Tremendous shkayach. Continue tomorrow.
Every shot on DEI is worth it.
No, it just happened twice in one day.